Hey Bulls, how are we doing today? How's everyone out there? Get us focused in. Alright. So we've only got a few people in right now. We'll give them a little bit of time before we go over the major stuff we'll be doing today. But we're going to go ahead and start by continuing work on this young Nephilim that we were working on last week. Getting his musculature done, which he has quite a lot. And we're actually pretty well progressed on that, and we'll probably start getting to the wings next. And if the music's too loud or too quiet, let me know, and we'll adjust it. Alright, so, in case you are new to this particular project, we're actually only using mostly just two colors. We're just using the Fang and Fenrisian Gray, and just working our way up from the dark to the light. And then if we need some extreme highlights, we have... set it aside, but I've lost track of it. But I do have a color set aside for it. Is it over here? There we go. I think it's the Pallid Witch Flash is the one I set aside for that, for the extreme highlights. Which, really, we're only going to need on the face. And I think I've already done those. Either I need to fix the point on this brush or get one with a better point on it. I'm ordering new brushes any day now. Just I have to wait for the vendor to actually have them. Till then, I just have to bear through slightly less than optimal brushes. Okay. So I need to fix something real quick. I see a little problem we have here. All right, I think we should be good now. Hey, thanks, me and some randoms. We're gonna definitely do our best today. Let's see how many we've got on now. 6 of us. Oh, yes. Okay, yeah. I mean, I totally welcome having people... Oh, let me turn the push the camera down a bit so you're not just listening to my bald spot talk to you. Yeah, I feel free to paint along, because that is one thing that I actually love, is when people actually are able to watch the stream and actually get some of their own stuff done at the same time. I think that's amazing. Yeah, I don't know. I usually have more people on by now, but it's a little slow today. Sometimes that's just how it is. You know, if Isendar's here, not here, then that's just a bad omen, right? Is when his Isendar not on bowls. I suppose that's possible, depending on where you live. You know, if there's actually any festivities associated with Carnival going on where you are. Let's see if there's some work we can do on the hands here. Yep, this brush does not like to cooperate. Oh, sorry, I've been making you guys look at nothing for a while. Alright. Yep, when your brush doesn't cooperate, your paints don't cooperate. When your paints don't cooperate, I need to get this thing under control before I totally Trogdor it. Alright, that's a little bit better. It's a little lighter than what I actually want for this. Oh, and that's not good either. Even using a wet palette, my paints dry a little faster than I would like on the model. And I think some of that has to do with the fact that this brush does not have great flow, so it lets the paint in it dry out pretty quickly. Alright, we need to start out with something a little more subtle. So what's everybody working on right now? What are your projects of the day? Or, you know, as often as my case, you know, the year or 2 years on and off. Lots and lots of Tyranids. Yeah, that is a thing that will make someone want to take a break. I once attempted to paint lots and lots of Tyranids. I have to admit, for some people, it is the fastest way to stop playing Tyranids. Even though they are a really fun army. I need to get more paint on my palette here. I think I need to tattoo some eyeballs or something on the top of my head, so when you guys are stuck staring at it, something more entertaining there. And just tattoo an ocula there, you know. God, the 40 to 60 termagants, that's insane. And over here, some of this is actually going to end up being fur that we're highlighting here, so I'm going to get two. Wow, okay. Yeah, well, you know, he's already pretty golden, so Guillemon should not be too big of a chore to do in gold. Sorry, I have just took a shower, so I have some water in my ears. I should have dealt with that before the stream, but ran out of time. So yes, I too am actually working on Grey Knight Paladins. I've had to put it on hold though, as there's other projects I'm trying to get done before I finish them, but yep, actually that was one of the first things we did on this stream when we first started it, was some of the Grey Knight Paladins. Unfortunately, we've had to put them on the back burner, because I have other projects I need to get done. Okay. Yeah, Dark Vengeance actually had some really neat models in it. I really liked the way they were going with the Dark Angels. Well, thanks, Savage. If you want to get into it, well, you know, it's a very cheap and easy hobby to get into, you know, with absolutely super low investment and in terms of both time and money. Absolutely. See, would this face lie? Would I lie to you? I'm not going to answer that. I will let you find out for yourself. But in all seriousness, Savage, yeah, if you if you finally decide that you want to take the plunge, you know, it definitely does have a time and money investment involved, but it has been one of the most rewarding things I've ever participated in my life. So, I mean, I can't say it was not worth it. No, this is actually not even Warhammer 40k. This is actually a young Nephilim from Malifaux. Malifaux is a skirmish game where each side has a gang, and instead of using dice, you actually use a deck of cards. And I know it sounds like a weird mechanic at first, but I have to say, you know, like, for the years that I've played the game, they actually pull it off very well. Like, if you're going to play a tabletop miniature game that does not use dice, that uses something unconventional like cards, this is definitely the game to go for that. They're currently in version 2, which a friend of mine, Mac Martin, actually had a hand in developing, and I have to say it is a huge improvement over version 1 if you played version 1. Much less confusion about the rules, much more simplistic, well, not simplistic, much simpler, still very in-depth gameplay, ton of different combinations you can use, ton of different possibilities, no limit to the number of strategies that can emerge. Yeah, it does have a little bit of a learning curve at first, but it's not as bad in those terms as games like War Machine, which you pretty much have to know what almost everything in the game does to play well competitively in that game. In Malifaux, you generally have some idea of how your opponent's crew is going to try to operate against you. And sometimes it's more important about how your crew operates rather than worrying so much about how theirs operates, though it does definitely help to know how they work and what they're going to try to do, and you know what kind of win conditions they're going to shoot for. But that's also one of the things I like about it. You get down on the board, people put their models down, and you don't necessarily know already how everything is going to play out. Like, there are a lot of tabletop war games where when you put your models on the table, you already know exactly the things that are going to happen that will make you win or lose the game. And Malifaux rarely turns out that way. In version 1 it was a little bit more like that because there was less balance between the different gangs. And probably sort of recently, before recently in version 2, they rebalanced a lot of masters fairly recently to be much more competitive. And so they're definitely getting better with it, so you will have plenty of ways to play the game and be able to enjoy it, not just get stomped on by all the veterans. I mean, this was a game that I jumped into late in version 1, and I actually was able to become pretty competitive fairly quickly, knowing very little about the game at first. So it is definitely not a tough game to learn. Version 2, however, I've kind of largely sat out of, not because I didn't want to do it, but because there wasn't really a big local following until, you know, that I'd seen until recently. And because I just didn't have the time to paint a new gang. They came out with a lot of new plastic models. I really wanted the plastic models. I already had the metal versions of those models, but I just didn't want to come out with them. Hold on, I have to take a phone call, guys. Okay, we're back. Alright, false alarm. It was, somehow my wife forgot that I have a painting stream every week on Thursday at the same time every week. So I was hoping it was not an emergency, and it was not, so I'm thankful for that. I have a little issue here. Let's see if I can... Okay, there we go. Had a little rough spot. I wanted to go ahead and get rid of it. Well, playing a Warhammer game, Savage, is a very interesting experience. If you like turn-based strategy games, then, you know, games like Warhammer 40k will probably appeal to you. If you are more of an RTS person, then it's a little bit more up in the air. You actually have to try it and see if you liked it to really know for sure. Because some people prefer having the ability to think quickly, mattering more than, you know, being able to kind of sit and think for a long time about how you're going to respond to a threat, which is really what Warhammer 40k allows you to do. They're really all tabletop war games. I mean, you don't have forever in really competitive settings, because games are timed, but it's also not, you're not super rushed or anything either. It's a little patchy at the moment, but we're going to blend in our darker colors soon, and that'll bring things down a bit. Switch to my other brush, maybe it'll... Yeah, it's a little bit better point right now. Kind of sacrificing precision at the moment to get a little bit better coverage with this color. And then sort of work backwards instead of highlighting. Working our way up with the highlights, we're going to kind of get these raised areas painted with their brighter color now, and then go back and add in the shading to blend them in together. I think that'll make things a little less stark. I mean, honestly, there's a whole lot of room for maneuver when it comes to miniature painting. Like Malifaux, because the gangs consist of about, 7 to 12 miniatures for an entire game. Even a big game can have that many miniatures easily. Versus 40K, which can easily have, 40 to 100 models on just one side. So with Malifaux, you can actually really take your time and really just go all out on a miniature. And it doesn't take you ages to get them on the tabletop. So that is what I do. I take my time with my Malifaux stuff. And it is by no means necessary to do so to actually have a decent looking Malifaux gang. It is not at all necessary. You can use much simpler techniques than the way that I'm shading and highlighting. I mean, you can really just, if you really want to, you could just paint this whole thing in the Fang. You could then just dry brush it with Fenrisian gray, and then just wash it with like a dark blue wash. Or even, you know, start with Fenrisian gray, and dry brush it with something a little bit lighter. Maybe not quite as light as Pallid Witchflesh. Maybe mix them together a little bit and dry brush that on. And then wash that with something that's about as dark as the Fang, you know, a blue wash that's about this color. And you'll already have, you know, something that looks really decent to put on the table, honestly. And it is not a problem at all. I mean, most of the tournaments seen in pretty much any tabletop war game that I've ever seen has something equivalent to what they call a 3-color standard. And that's, you know, the model has 3 distinct colors painted on it, not including the base itself. Of course, you know, there are some minor exceptions made when it's obvious that a great deal of effort was made, even though the palette is not necessarily huge. Like if you're painting a green ghost, no matter how much, you know, shading and highlighting you're doing on it, no matter how many colors you actually use, essentially it's still a ghost that is green. And so, you know, the 3-color rule is not quite so hard and fast when it comes to stuff like that, you know. It's fairly reasonable. Not getting this to... It's a little less subtle than I would like it to be. Let's see if this intermediate will solve the problem. Alright, I think that did work. Oh yeah, 40k lore has no end. I mean, it's got tons and tons of lore, lots and lots of characters, a little bit of something for pretty much everyone, and they're actually getting better with it now. They are improving on the lore and actually beginning to expand the story now. Things are actually moving forward. Where 40k for a long time was actually a really static universe where nothing really changed. You didn't really expect anything to change. The only time anything changed is when they added, like, you know, a new faction or something. You know, they would have, oh, you know, Chaos has a new crusade, and yeah, all kinds of things are going to happen. But in reality, really nothing all that exciting would come as a result of it. But, you know, there are recent developments, you know, with the Primarchs returning and all of that. they're actually starting to really ramp up for exciting things to happen in the lore universe, of Warhammer. Sort of in a way that they built up to Age of Sigmar was sort of a warm-up, I think, for them to start really looking at making significant events in the 40k universe occur. Oh, World Eaters and Night Lords? Oh yeah. I've always loved World Eaters. I wish they would give them new models, though. I mean, I remember when they came out with the plastic Berserkers that they have now, but that was, man, it's getting close to 20 years ago. You know, and they were amazing models then, because models with that kind of multi-pose ability were not at all the norm. I mean, they were kind of groundbreaking back then, but they are really showing their age now. I mean, Games Workshop has outdone themselves, and their new minis are so great that some of their old ones now that used to be considered really good just aren't holding up anymore. And so yeah, we need new Khorne Berserker models, is what I'm saying. And they will be amazing, I have no doubt about it. Night Lords, I don't know if they have any plastic options for Night Lords nowadays. But if you're ever on the stream when Larry is doing 40k, he's a big Night Lords fan, so he can definitely tell you what the deal is with them. And it's not that World Eaters haven't gotten any love. I mean, there's plenty of like neat Khorne stuff that's come out recently. Fairly recently anyway. But new Khorne Berserkers themselves, the base troop, was not one of those things. So I think there's still some room for Games Workshop to show some love to one of the coolest units, honestly, in 40k, the Khorne Berserkers. And honestly, nowadays, a pretty effective unit. At least, if you can get them in close combat. Oh, yes. Yeah, Angron is, like many of the Primarchs, his story is kind of a tragedy. And not just the story of someone who is, just naturally a villain. And it's very similar to Magnus, who always did what he thought was the right thing to do, and the thing that his father, wanted. But in the end, he ended up becoming one of the greatest servants of the Chaos Gods. I mean, and it really is a tragic sort of story about how things went so wrong and how everyone was deceived into going along with this sort of scheme in order to bring about the downfall of, one of mankind's greatest servants. Yes, you're right about that, me and some randoms. In fact, that is a very, very true statement. The first reference I can recall of it is when Batman is talking about Superman in Injustice. Yes, and he says exactly that. Every villain is the hero of his own story. And, you know, it doesn't just apply to villains in comic books and games and science fiction. It actually applies in real life too. You can take even history's villains, and they all have their own justifications for what they've done. But yes, it's absolutely not just, you know, a provocative statement. It's actually, I think, honestly wisdom to understand that idea. That a lot of the time someone who we would see as clearly evil sees themselves as someone who is doing the right thing. Even if they're actually totally delusional in thinking so, or if their whole line of thinking is fundamentally flawed. They don't usually see themselves as the bad guy being the bad guy. They see themselves often as the person who is doing what is necessary and which is why that kind of thinking is fraught with peril. Well, I wasn't talking about anyone in particular, actually. But, you know, you can definitely apply it into a context of both past or present history, for sure. But while I can assure you that everybody at Bulls certainly has their opinions about today's current state and the politics therein, we don't, as a rule, directly address them. At least not, you know, on our stream. So... well, in Angron's case, it's a little bit different. So, Magnus, though, it was quite a bit, it was, much more similar to that. He didn't really, it wasn't really that he didn't save him or spare him. It was really that the Emperor wanted Magnus to answer for what he had done, and so he wanted the Space Wolves to just bring him before the Emperor. But Horus managed to confuse the orders that the Space Wolves had received, and made them think that they were going there to actually destroy Prospero. And I don't remember if it was to capture or destroy the Thousand Sons and Magnus, but that was pretty much what almost happened. When disaster could have been averted had they simply brought Magnus before the Emperor, there was still some kind of possibility of, some kind of resolution where Magnus remained loyal and his Thousand Sons remained loyal. But once the Space Wolves began attacking Prospero, there was no hope of recovering from that. At that point, they were at best renegades. Angron's more tragic because, for what I understand, I never read the books myself, but somebody explained it to me. He has some kind of device attached to his head that apparently his adoptive homeworld put onto, I guess, gladiators, maybe slaves in general, but at least gladiators like himself. And it apparently drives you mad. And so while he would have normally had, the temperament of what most Primarchs probably would have had, he just kind of has this madness as a result. Yeah, the Butcher's Nails, there you go. But I don't know much about whether or not the Emperor would have saved his army. I actually don't know a lot of details about the story arc, so... That is one thing I am not as informed as I'd like to be on, is all of the different fates of the Primarchs and how they sort of ended up in the situations they're in. I only know some basic details for a lot of them. But that's another area where the lore is expanded considerably, is when they did the Horus Heresy series. And you finally understood who the Primarchs were and, their motivations and their weaknesses that sort of caused them to fall to chaos. Because for a long time in 40k, they were just, this is Angron. He's the Primarch of the World Eaters, and here is his, model for Epic 40k, a very angry-looking devil guy. And that was about all you knew about him. Well, you can always get the rulebook, I mean, you gotta start somewhere. But I think good lore is definitely a, I think it's overlooked sometimes by some miniature makers. And I'm glad that, companies like Games Workshop and Weird, who makes Malifaux, and Privateer Press, who make War Machine, I'm glad that they all realize, actually, the importance that lore has to the player of an army. Not every player cares about lore, of course, but there is a very significant proportion that do, and for them it's really a very big deal about, you know, what motivates them to play the army that they play. Because, you know, while it's not true for everybody, sometimes the army that somebody picks to play actually says something about them, you know, not something that they're not conscious of, something they're very conscious of. They say, you know, what really seems like an army that plays the way, either plays the way I like or just has a lore that I really, you know, enjoy. I don't want to say identify with, because you probably don't want to necessarily identify with Khorne Berserkers, you know. Unless you do have, you know, a fountain of blood in your house with, you know, piles of skulls everywhere. I'm not going to judge. Hey, Kartoffelbauer, how are you doing? You're actually here just in time to see me switch to a German infantry fighting vehicle for a little while, and then come back to this guy to wrap things up. I think we can actually get his blue skin pretty close to done. May make some progress on the wings. That would be nice. Yes, back to the Martyr. Yep, I actually have got it shaded, and now we're just going to go to the cleanup and then the highlight. Which the highlight's honestly the easiest part, but yeah, unlike this guy, highlighting a Team Yankee tank can be a lot simpler. Doesn't have to be. I've definitely seen people go pretty crazy with their highlights on these 100mm vehicles. Or sorry, 1/100s, not 100mm. I think that would be pretty big. So, anybody have any questions about what we've been working on so far, or about even any of the games that we've been discussing? Feel free to ask. I mean, we got lots of air, so feel free to share some of it. If you have opinions, feel free to share them. We're not an antisocial group here. Though Isendar, our usual social butterfly, is absent today, unfortunately. It's always nice to have him. Well, it's pretty easy, Kartoffel. I've just been painting this blue guy so far, so, you know, you haven't missed too much. But mostly we've been just talking about 40k lore up to this point. I talked for a little bit about you know, some of the characteristics of different tabletop war games, because you have somebody who's familiar with the lore of 40K, but he's never played tabletop war games. So, hey, Big Lurchy, how you doing? It's good to see you. Welcome to the Bowls painting stream, the Veteran Sergeant. Alright, give that a second. Alright. Oh, yes, we got some cleanup over here. Make everything look nice and So how about you, Big Lurchy? You working on anything today? Honestly, Amorai, right now, I'm kind of going back and forth. So I'm trying to preserve some sense of zenithal lighting. But because these two, mostly because my brush doesn't have amazing flow right now, I'm trying to go back and forth between the two to try to keep sort of the roughness that this brush sort of brings to the game to a minimum. You know, so I just kind of go and glaze in a little bit just to kind of tone down rough patches and keep things looking like they're properly blended. Even though this brush is not great at blending, in my opinion. Huh. 11 p.m., man. Way off in Europe then, I assume. So Amorai, I guess the best answer for that is use glazing whenever you have colors that, whenever you have highlights that don't look natural with the color that you're highlighting, or would look better or look more natural after the glaze. That's, of course, there's many things you can use a glaze for, like whenever I do my Death Guard and you see me do the leather strapping on them, you'll see another particularly good use of a glaze. But for bright colors, in a way it does depend on the color. You know, glazes work extremely well with bright yellows. They work. They're really not necessary for reds. Reds you can blend together usually pretty well. A highlight with oranges, and not really have to use any glazes to achieve really good effects. But sometimes you really just have to look at the model and say, you know, would a glaze tie this together better, and, you know, just try it. In this case, I'm not actually really glazing. I'm just using really thin down shade color for the recess, and still getting harsher distinctions between the colors than I want in some places. And really, mostly what I'm doing to resolve that is I'm mixing the dark color and the light color together and just using an intermediate and just applying that lightly to smooth out where things appear to be a little too stark. Alright, take care, Big Lurchy. It's good to see you. And really, you know, another factor is, of course, time. If you're going to do zenithal shading, That implies you're going to be doing a lot of highlighting, you know, wet blending by hand. And some people just don't have time for that with what they're doing, you know. I mean, right now I'm painting Malifaux. And Malifaux has, you know, the distinct advantage of having a low model count, which allows you to really go all out on a few minis. You know, you've only got, you know, half to a full dozen models you have to worry about. Then you've got a full and very viable and competitive array of miniatures for the game already. Whereas with 40K, even if you get Custodes right now with their low model count, you're still going to have a lot of work ahead of you. That's still more models than what you would have in a Malifaux army. Though not drastically more, depending on what you choose to take. But, you know, Custodes is also an example of extreme low model count army for 40K. I mean, I thought Grey Knights were a pretty extreme example of low model count for 40K, and now, you know, yeah, the Custodes have that beat hands down now. But yeah, I mean, if you have the time, try to do the extreme highlights. Try to always give the impression that there is a light source, because that will always give your models the depth that really makes them stand out. But there are ways to do it without necessarily spending hours on brushwork like I'm doing here, you know. It can certainly be accomplished in faster ways, and glazing is one of the ways you can do that. Yep. So I think he's come along pretty well. I still need to do the other part of the torso. We may do that in a bit. But yeah, I'm happy with the direction he's going in. So, without further delay, let's take a look at this Martyr. Martyr is an infantry fighting vehicle developed by West Germany, or at least for West Germany, in the 1970s. I think 1971 is when the first one went into service. This one is for another tabletop war game called Team Yankee, in which the Cold War goes hot in, I believe, 1984. And so I have a West German army that is preparing itself to fend off hordes of Soviet infantry, tanks, aircraft, and so where we are now, last week I showed a little bit about painting the camouflage pattern onto the vehicle, and really the big thing about that is make sure you get good coverage with all of the different colors you're using. Now we're on to shading, which I've already done the wash. Note here that you can see, you know, places where I did not wash the entire vehicle front to back. All I did was I tried to wash everywhere where there's a nook and cranny, a convolution, any kind of thing where there is detail, where shading can make it stand out more. Now, you know, that is the easy part, of course. You know, you just take the wash, you brush it in there. Now here is where it gets interesting. First, let's go ahead and take care of the easy part. Because anything that's just one color, you can take care of very easily for most things with a dry brush. particularly when you're dealing in this scale. When you're dealing in this scale, things that are dry brushed usually look a lot more natural than they do in some of the larger scales. And this, I mean, this dry brush here is probably not even necessary because I'm going to add soil pigments at the end of the whole process. That'll be the last thing I do to finish this model. And yeah, the wheels will be very dirty, muddy, and this dry brush may not even really matter much. But we're going to go ahead and do it anyway. Take some of the edge off of the wash there. Alright. Now, the fun part, which will be touching up the camo pattern. This may seem like a long and tedious and unnecessary step, but if you really want the shading in your vehicle to come out when you use extensive camouflage like this, it really is very useful. Indispensable, I would say. Because you never realize how much your wash shaded your vehicle until you go back with your original colors and start touching up and seeing how the shading sort of brings life to the otherwise less noticeable parts of your vehicle. Now, this is by no means an absolute necessity. If you want to wash your tank and say she's done, you can totally do that and still have great looking tanks on the table. You absolutely can. You have to be a little bit more careful about your wash, since you're not going to go back and do direct touching up. And you don't want to, because if you're going to wash the entire vehicle with that wash, if you do any touch-ups to any one part, you're going to have it look like it was dirty, and then you added a clean spot. The whole vehicle will look that way, and you don't want that. So if you choose to go the wash and done technique, make sure that that is exactly what you do. And something to note also that helps when you're going to do that, gloss varnish the whole model first. And then you have less of the problem of the wash pooling on the flat surfaces of the model. It will stick primarily to the recesses, and you'll usually be happier with the results that way. Not completely necessary to do that, but it does help a little bit. But if you find that you can't get rid of the glossiness when you finally go to put a finishing coat on it, then maybe that might change your mind. Somehow, in the course of an hour while sitting here, this thing got actually pretty dusty. Let's just keep a nice soft but long brush on hand just to dust things off quickly if I need to. Yep, live in Texas, lots of dust. this touch-up time is also a good time for you to, make sure that your patterns came out the way you wanted them to. I kind of just put them on there, knowing that I'm going to be doing a touch-up afterward, so you can get too crazy making sure the lines were too precise, because I knew that I was going to have to clean them up anyway. And now this is the time to take care of all that. I'm going to go back to the green because I should probably finish one color per section at a time. What I mean by section is I'm going to do the side here first, primarily, and then move on to other sections of the tank and do them also the same sort of methodical approach, and take care of one part of the tank or vehicle. It's not really a tank. APC, IFV, whatever you want to call it, at a time, one part at a time, and make sure it's completely addressed so that you do not miss it, because at this scale it's kind of easy to miss things. Now, as I said before, earlier in the stream, with these types of models, you can definitely go with full-on highlighting and shading, as you would do for any other type of model, and you can definitely get good results that way. I personally don't do that. I kind of like to keep them a little bit more, I want them to have shading, but I don't want them to be too highlighted. Don't want there to be too much contrast, because at this scale that can remove some of its natural look, and I think sometimes that can make it look cartoony if you overdo it. But then again, I've also seen examples where people did that extremely well, and it was just an absolutely amazing model. And sometimes it has a lot to do with what color the model is. Like models that are predominantly extremely dark like this, it's a little bit harder to do something like that with. But you go into like World War II, when the Germans had, very yellow tanks and equipment, you definitely can do a lot with the highlighting and shading on that, and still have amazing looking models that look, well, as real as as can be done. They look, let's say, natural is I think that's why you're not going for necessarily real, but you're going for natural. It's a little too dark. Let's see if I can... see if I can brighten things up a bit. There we go. Not necessarily making it brighter, but we're turning up the color intensity, which effectively gives a similar result. Also, for those of you who were not here last week, some interesting things about this camouflage scheme for this Marder infantry fighting vehicle. When this camo scheme, called the NATO camo scheme, was introduced and put into service, one thing that there was to note is that every single Marder infantry fighting vehicle in the West German Army had this exact same pattern. This is not just some random pattern that I came up with as I was painting it. This is actually from a template that every Marder infantry fighting vehicle had to be painted that way. And it was the same for every single vehicle in the West German Army. From Jeeps to all of their tanks, you know, water delivery trucks. I mean, everything. Every vehicle, every piece of equipment had a very specific template on how it would be painted with these three colors. And it was not unique to West Germany. Actually, the U.S. also had the NATO template, but they began to implement it a little bit later in the 80s than the Germans did. But if you've ever been in the Marines like me, you have seen plenty of the three-color NATO camouflage, because it is still one of, if not the most common, paint scheme or camouflage scheme on Marine Corps equipment still. Though a lot of equipment and a lot of branches of the service in the U.S. have gone to some type of desert camouflage, at least for now. So, actually see places where I should have applied my wash, and I did not, at least not properly. So let's get it in there. And that'll be just minor touching up to fix later. Let's make sure the other side got an adequate dose of it. So how's the commentary, guys? You guys have been quiet for a while, so are you just politely waiting for me to shut the hell up and just paint, or are you keeping yourselves busy? Because keeping yourselves busy is certainly not a bad alternative. Fully encourage getting some painting done of your own whilst watching this stream. If anything, it may be the best possible thing you get out of this stream, is just having a time to sit down and paint. And if this looks tedious and time-consuming, don't worry. I've got 6 more of these to do after this one. And that's just this vehicle. Then I've got plenty of other West German vehicles. What needs painting? I don't mind this at all, because once I finish those, I will be done with an entire army for Team Yankee. And unlike most tabletop war games, once you finish an army for a particular era in Team Yankee, or well, in Flames of War, or any really historical game, you don't often see big expansions that you have to worry about. You're usually pretty set. Occasionally they'll surprise you with something neat, but usually it's something you're more excited about than, you know, man, I have to paint more models now. Oh, Pestigores. Nice, yes. Always fun to have Nurgle. Seraphim Sepia, or even just go with Agrax Earthshade. Rakarth Flesh has, if I remember correctly, it's sort of similar to Pallid Flesh, but it has a bit of a tinge to it that the yellowiness of Seraphim Sepia might not agree with. But honestly, I would try base painting one, just base paint 2 of them with the Rakarth Flesh, and try one with Seraphim Sepia and try one with Agrax Earthshade and see which one you like better. Or maybe even try something with a little different color to it, not the sepia color or the dark brown of the Earthshade, but, you know, something of an actual color to it. Unfortunately for Rakarth Flesh, there's probably not anything that is a complementary color that would look like probably all that good with it. So, yeah, try those 2 first and see what you think. You know, you could just do like a section of, or you can even just do one model and paint like one half of it with one shade and one with the other, and, you know, just compare them that way. Never be afraid to experiment, because it's better to torture one model with experimentation than have to paint an entire army and find out you hate it. This is actually my second approach to painting West German vehicles. My first approach was much more like what I described to everyone earlier about just applying a gloss coat and then washing it. In fact, I even applied the dry brushed highlight first, and then applied a gloss coat, and then applied a wash of Agrax Earthshade. And while the results weren't bad, it was not quite what I wanted. And so I have decided that I like my West Germans enough that I am willing to spend the requisite time to use this method and make it work and get the look that I really want out of them. The short version of all that is I'm crazy. I am crazy, and I may never actually finish an entire army in my life. But that's good, right? Because I will always have something to paint on stream. I will never run out. Are Pestigores still metal, or do they have plastic versions of those? Oh, okay. Wow, that actually sounds kind of neat, especially with the new plague bearers. Well, thanks, Kartoffelbauer. I appreciate it. I do my best. I consider myself a decent painter. I do not consider myself a world-class painter by any means, and there are some extremely good painting streamers on Twitch that I cannot possibly take anything away from. And, I mean, there are people I would watch when I want to learn something. So don't think that I am your one-stop painting stream solution by any means. But I like to have well-painted models, and I'm willing to put in some effort to make that happen. And, you know, a lot of it's just knowing the techniques that you need to achieve the results that you want. And I have no problem with sharing what knowledge I have of those techniques with everyone else. And also, of course, I have absolutely no problem with someone telling me new techniques and how to do new things, because I am in constant need of new things. Well, of course, I can't mention other streaming painters without first, of course, mentioning Goatboy, who streams after me a few hours, about an hour and a half after I'm done streaming. Also streams on this channel for bowls. And then, of course, one of my particular favorites is Shoshi's. She actually just got partnered with Twitch, and so she's very excited about that. And you should check her out sometime because she does some really neat stuff. And unlike me, she actually finishes miniatures usually on her stream. After 2 or 3 streams, she'll be done with something particularly complex, and it's but with really, really nice results. And I really like the work that she does. Alright, we're going to have to do some winging it here because I just realized I actually missed a part of the pattern from the template, so I'm going to have to get it in here. Luckily, this is not really going to slow us down much, so I just got to get it in here. And bam. And no one's the wiser. But as far as other ones, I believe, God, there's actually a lot of them, but I wish I could remember the names of some of the ones that I actually like, and they're kind of eluding me at the moment. But Shoshi's, like I mentioned, is one of the best, I think, because it's very consistently on, and she's consistently good at what she does. And there's a lot of technique and a lot of substance to her painting stream. And I would definitely say it is more elaborate than mine. But also, she's a professional streamer, so for me, this is, you know, I come out once a week, show you guys what I'm working on, and, you know, just kind of hopefully paint together, and, you know, just have a good time. In fact, I may actually have to change hours soon because I have a job interview next Friday. And if all goes well, I will be working daytimes again. So, my hours will have to adjust for the stream. That does not mean I'm going away, though. I will still be here, guys. There will still be a painting stream. It will just not be at 4 p.m. in my time. It's going to have to move a little bit. So do brace yourselves. It's not going to be super soon because the interviews are not even till next Friday. So next Thursday I will still be here at the normal time, and I will talk with Larry and Mars about a good time slot to move to. Sorry, I had a little bit of a rough patch where I did not thin my paint as much as I should have, so I got out a brush that I like to use for these situations. Just rough enough to smooth out problems like that without damaging other parts of the paint job. Sounds weird, but, you know, and I only have one brush that I actually think has those characteristics, and it just kind of ended up in that role on accident. But, yeah. Oddly enough, I don't have a brush that I like doing for fine brushwork at the moment, but I do have a brush for scrubbing the odd thick spot off of paint off of a model. If that even makes any sense. Alright, we got the green part on there. So I think, if I remember correctly now, it's Shoshi's Magnificent Painting, I think, is the full name. So definitely a big contributor to the hobby. Of course, there's a lot of other ones. I mean, there really are quite a few. So, you know, check out Creative and probably anything under the tag miniatures. You'll probably run into quite a few neat things, and some people working on some pretty fun stuff. But honestly, if you're looking for... So right now I'm using GW brand brushes. They're adequate. They're not amazing. I mean, they're not my go-to, but I will use them when I need a brush, and the brushes that I want are not readily available, or they're just too expensive, which is usually the case. My preferred brush is actually my one go-to for any kind of work that requires even broad to fine detail. I use a Raphael 8404 zero size. And even though it's a size 0, it has a surprisingly fine point on it and has extremely good water retention because it's Kolinsky Sable. But they're also not cheap. They're about $14 a brush. And a lot of the time you won't find it just by going to your art store. Your art store will probably be able to order it for you, but it's not something that's normally kept in stock by a lot of them, at least not where I am. So the internet is a good spot to go to for that, though. And in fact, I am going to be ordering some of that brush very soon. But I just need to actually sit down and order them. I'm not in a huge rush to get it done because the vendor that has them is out of stock until late February, so I still have some time. But yeah, I definitely agree with you, Kartoffelbauer. Like when I got my first set of Raphaels, actually my very first one was given to me by Michael Fontaine. If you're familiar with him, he is absolutely a world-class painter and does just amazing work. I do not believe that he streams. I could be wrong about that. But he is a very active painter nonetheless, and is always putting out really neat projects. And definitely worth checking out. Anyway, back to... Yes, I took a 2-day class, a little weekend class from him years ago, and one of the things he greeted us with was he gave each of us a Raphael 8404 size 0, and I was sold from that moment. It was without a doubt one of the best brush, like maybe probably the best brush I'd ever used. And you know, we asked him, what do you use this for? He's like, everything. Well, what do you use for like painting, like, you know, tiny dots on things? I use this same brush. And, like, I use it for everything. You know, like, except base coating. Like, he base coats with usually an airbrush. And that's another thing he's exceedingly good at, is using the airbrush to maximum effect. But yeah, he essentially swears by this by the Raphael 8404. I'm going to say this brush, but that's not the one I'm holding. Is not one, and for good reason. It is an extremely good brush. And you know, it's one of those things, you never know how much your current brushes are limiting you until you try an extremely good brush and see how different it is. And then you're forced to go back to cheap brushes that don't cooperate, and, you know, then you're in my world. I mean, these aren't actually bad. They get the job done. You just have to work a little harder than you'd normally have to. I don't really take away anything from GW because though these aren't what I would call amazing brushes, these are definitely the best iteration of brushes they've come out with. They're definitely better than a lot of the ones they did in the past. So I kind of strayed past the one panel I was supposed to be working on, so let me get myself back there so we can finish it. And then we're gonna go back to the Malifaux for just a little bit because we're gonna get close to stopping time very soon. It's one of the unfortunate parts about the current schedule. Really the only unfortunate part about the current schedule is that I have things I have to do in the evening on Thursdays. So even if I want to, I could not extend it beyond its normal time. It's called a Raphael 8404, but that's not the size. They're actually the 8404s come in an array of sizes, but I prefer the size 0 myself. So if you just like Google Raphael 8404, it will have a whole array of them to choose from, and you can just choose the size you want. No, 8404. Yep, they're Kolinsky Sable. They're primarily, I believe they were originally designed for watercolors, yeah. It turns out they still work exceptionally well for miniature painting, at least for water-based paints. Not really sure they would work all that well for ether-based paints, but they could. I don't know much about what their requirements would be for those kinds of paints. If you use like Tamiya paints a lot. But yeah, basically all of these brushes that we use to paint our miniatures are based on watercolor brushes in some way or another. All of the basic characteristics you look for in both are there. The only real difference is obviously miniature painters are looking for the much smaller sizes and more pointed shapes usually. Though not exclusively, there's definitely uses for some of the flat type brushes and so on. It's actually a little bit fortunate that miniature painters want these smaller varieties of brushes that watercolor painters would be using, because a large brush made from Kolinsky Sable can be extraordinarily expensive. And so the fact that we use the smaller brushes actually makes it a little bit easier for us in terms of the cost. And that's probably because the cost of the brush, a lot of that, not just comes from, assuring that the hairs are assembled, probably, whatever the term is for when you're putting a brush together, that the brush is made properly, but also the fact that the hairs themselves have to come from this Siberian muskrat. That's entails a little bit of work to obtain. Now, as I'm aware, they don't actually harm the muskrats. They just, you know, clip some of the fur from the end of their tail and then wait for it to grow back again. Let's get a little bit more shade in there because we inadvertently got a little bit of the highlight color. Not really highlight color, but base color. And yes, I know I'm straying again. Yep, some people get distracted by squirrels. For me, everything is a squirrel. A vegan brush? I'm not even sure if there was technically such a thing, because even the synthetic brushes are made from petroleum products, which at one point were part of living things. I guess those things would technically probably be vegan because most of them were probably plankton, but there could be some dinosaur in there, and you know, what percent of dinosaur makes it not vegan anymore? This is probably not a productive line of discussion, honestly. Alright, so this is one of our side panels finished. Basically finished. I mean, we still have to do a very, 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 very light dry brush of our highlight color onto it. It's going to be very light. It's going to be still noticeable, but it's not going to be super intense. So it's just there to give it a little bit of, you know, if I hold it, this angle here where you see where the panels meet, you see a little bit of the natural highlight there. We're just going to emphasize, we're going to try to emphasize that a little bit without going too crazy. That's my hope anyway. I don't want it to go crazy. So if it's hard to tell what the difference is, just look at this side before we tidied things up. You know, just got the wash on there, and then the camouflage pattern, but no touch-ups yet to neaten things up. And then here's our neater version. You know, so everything's a lot sharper, the details are a lot more crisp. You can really see all of the different parts of this vehicle's side panel. And so I'm going to continue working on this off stream, and you guys will definitely get to take a look at the highlight. I may not apply it on stream. I might wait until then, or it might just not be done until then. But it's honestly very simple. It's dry brushing. You just do it extremely lightly, and we'll show you the results. even if I do finish this one off stream, there are still 6 others I've got to do just like it. So eventually you will see the highlighting step. So, and we'll put the turret on there. This ring is just painted red so that when the vehicle is destroyed in the game, I can just take the turret off and be like, yeah, this one's just a wreck. I know it's a wreck, so, you know, I mean, I could get complicated wreck markers too, but, you know, if I don't have those yet, this is an easy, you know, quick solution to that. Alright, well, let's set him to the side. Let's go back to our first friend here, our young Nephilim, who is eagerly awaiting the painting of his wings. And we've only got about 20 more minutes, so yeah, there's going to be definitely other West German stuff, Kartoffelbauer. In fact, I'll show you some of the stuff I already finished before I even started doing this stream, you know, a few months ago. And there's definitely other things I need to paint. Most of them are vehicles, so I'm probably not going to try to subject the stream to watching me paint all of them, because they're all pretty much going to be the same process for the vehicles themselves. When I actually have some more infantry I need to paint, and so if the opportunity is there, I would definitely like to do some of the infantry on stream, especially painting some of the badges and stuff that are on the arms of the infantry. I think that would be pretty neat to check out. So, we need to give this guy a little bit of attention in the front, because he has a lot of detail here that can definitely be brought out a bit more. Can't go too extreme on it because it's obviously he's hunched over, so the light is not going to be as stark, or as the light's not going to have much of an effect, and we don't want to make it look like it does, because that could kind of throw off the natural look of the model. We do want to maintain that appearance that he is hunched over. But at the same time, we don't want to ignore it, because it is an interesting part of the model, and highlighting it will definitely add something to the model. And if you're wondering about this process that I'm going through right now, mostly just kind of going back and forth between light and dark until I find what I like. And we may just go with simple lines to emphasize the area a little bit, but just a bit. Just to let people know it's there. Need a little bit more paint on my palette. Alright, that's good. Probably spent more time on it than we even should have, considering that this is basically the perspective you will see the model in most of the time. So, I think we've given it due attention. I'll make a little bit of adjustment to these biceps real quick. And we'll have to decide what to do with the wings. Oh, that was... Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. This is where a really good brush would be nice. You get used to being able to have more time to push paint around before it starts to dry. And so then I have to go a little bit more water, you know, thin the paint even more before I put it on, but you can get to a point where it's not easy to use with a brush like this that can't really hold the fluid all that well. So we're going to try more of a more palette blending in this case. Because wet blending in this case is going to be a little more difficult. Just get a nice thin, little bit of blending here. Just smooth this little transition here from our medium blue color to our highlight. Alright, and I see there's an area here that needs some attention. Sometimes when you look at a model from only one angle and it has a lot of different parts, you can end up missing something, like the inside of this arm. Fortunately, it's not time-consuming to deal with it. Alright, I think that's pretty much the body's blue skin finished. We've got the wings left to go. I've still got to decide how I'm going to go about doing the webbing on the wings, but other than that, the wings will be pretty easy. And we'll probably do that next stream, you know, if I don't start on it sooner. But even if I do, there's still yet another young Nephilim we have to do. He's ready and waiting to be painted. And then, of course, the Terror Tots, one of which I've already started. So if you're familiar with the game, or if you're not familiar with the game, rather, in Malifaux, a Terror Tot can actually be grown into a young Nephilim through certain mechanics in the game if you take the right stuff to allow it. You can always just outright pay your points and just get you know, the larger guy already. But there are also mechanics in the game through which you can turn this little Terror Tot into a young Nephilim. And then the young Nephilim can be grown into the mature Nephilim, which in the game is, yeah, a real melee beast, and is quite fast, too. So, you know, yeah, you're growing a rather unintimidating, but somehow really creepy child into a big, scary monster. And that's not all what we have in this gang. There's not just the blue-skinned guys. There's going to be some other stuff too. We got Lilith and Nekima also coming up. Once we finish all the blue-skinned guys, we'll definitely get around to them. Maybe even start them a little bit sooner. And hopefully the rest of my bases will come in so I can actually start basing them when that happens. So we got about 5 minutes left. Kartoffelbauer, do you want to see some of the other West German stuff that I already finished? We can do that for a few minutes before we close up here, if you're interested. So, I talked about the prototype vehicle that I did for West Germans. This was the prototype. I didn't like how dark it came out. I've actually already started doing some repainting on it. That's why it's a little bit lighter up here and the highlight's gone. I thought the highlight was a little too strong, so I want to tone that down some, which is why I said I'm going to do it extremely lightly. I'm still going to keep the mud and, you know, the soil. Yeah, yep, Leopard 2. The funny thing is I'm actually switching to the 1 because Leopard 2s in Team Yankee are actually very expensive to field. For what it takes to get 2 of them on the field, you can get 7 Leopard 1s and still have a point left. So, so I'm going to be switching to those for a while, but I'm still going to eventually paint my Leopard 2s as well, of course, because they're great models and great vehicles. Show you some of my West German infantry. I think he's got a chip on his hand I need to fix. Yep, he sure does. It's funny, only when I put it up to the camera do I actually notice things like this, like a guy whose finger has lost its paint. Easy enough to fix, just got to remember to actually do it. And then of course a Milan team. And this is the whole platoon for West German infantry. This is actually atypically small for an infantry formation in Team Yankee, but the West German infantry have small units, but they're actually very effective, especially against tanks. So I will be getting another squad of them, and we may just be seeing a bit of them on stream. Now, on to the part that I think is one of the best, one of my favorites, the aircraft. Yeah, if you like the Cold War era stuff, definitely check out Team Yankee if you're not already into it. Because Team Yankee is actually a pretty good game. Yep. About the only thing I can say I don't like about about Team Yankee is missions that use reserves. Other than that, I think it's generally a really good rule set and a fun game to play. You know, and certainly one of the best they've ever done. And here is a Bow helicopter. Can't remember if it's a Bow 105, 108. Can't remember off the top of my head. But it's basically a news chopper, or just any civilian helicopter. You're just generic civilian helicopter made by West Germans, with some rocket launchers tied to the side of it, anti-tank rockets. Despite that, it is extremely effective. Also in the game, it is extremely effective at taking out tanks. It is probably one of my scariest units I have for dealing with tanks for my West German army when facing Soviets. Because Soviets just don't really have anything in their arsenal that has any hope of taking a hit from that, in terms of armor and surviving. Yes, that's right. The Volkov, yeah, with the I can't remember what the hot missile stands for, but yeah, it's the hot missile. Yep, that's exactly what it is. Yeah, and yeah, they're definitely fun units. Yeah. That's right. It is the Bow 105. Yeah. It's weird. I actually forget the names of the models I own more often than I forget other random vehicles from the modern era. And here's also some work in progress. They're just getting their stripes, so to speak, or literally. My artillery. Luckily, I only have to do 3 of these. So, oh, is it? Yeah. In which case, if I knew what it stood for, I would just butcher it anyway. And this will be interesting to paint. Beobachtungspanzerartillerie. It's a very unique vehicle because it's basically an American M113 with like a weird periscope on it, and it's used for infantry. It's used for artillery spotting, and maybe I'll get around to. Maybe it'll be on stream sometime painting that. Maybe not. But it's going to be painted the same way as all the other vehicles. Just according to the template, using the same techniques. So if you miss it, you didn't really miss much. If you've seen what I've been doing today, you've caught most of what you need to know to do that. All right, well, I'm out of time. I got to go have dinner before I begin my Thursday World of Warcraft raid. So, so off from one nerd adventure to another. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining me today. I hope you all got something out of it. I hope you all had a lot of fun. And I wish we could do it longer, but I've got other things I got to take care of. Please come next week. In fact, you can come back in an hour and a half and check out Go Boy, see what he's up to, see what he's painting today. I'm sure it's going to be something pretty wild. And let's see. I will make sure I try to find out about rescheduling the stream in case I get a job offer very soon, so I can get you guys informed about what we're going to do with that, so you guys don't miss the next time. Right, and I think that covers everything. So yeah, prepare for more. Yeah, it's not gonna. Well, I don't know what time is it for you right now, Kartoffelbauer? Because let's see, I know you live in Europe, right? 1:30 right now? Yeah, 3 a.m. may be a bit much. You may check out, though, I think Bell of Lost Souls does post recordings of the stream. I know you don't get the interactive part, but at least you'll get to see some of the painting if you want to check it out. Well, we're still going to be 4 o'clock next stream. Nothing's going to change for next week. Nothing at all. So it'll be next week at the normal time, and even then I may not have any news about changes yet, because I don't have the interviews until the next day. So, you know, so just, you know, I'll get you guys news as soon as I can. If they give me a job offer right away and I have to like start the next week, I'll probably have to have you know, have it changed on the Bulls schedule so that people can see. But otherwise, you know, I'll try to get you guys informed as soon as I can. All right, well, you guys take care. Have a good day. You know, enjoy painting. Get some painting done. Get some more painted models out there on the field. And thanks for coming.